Aston Villa and Unai Emery have been widely praised for bringing in two big names this summer in Pau Torres and Yuri Tillerman. Everyone's convinced these are huge positive moves. But I have questions. First up, let's do the polite thing and introduce the two new players. Pau Torres, 26-year-old centre-back, won the Europa League with Villarreal, played for Unai Emery, his new old manager at Aston Villa, played for Spain at the World Cup, played for Spain at the European Championships. Pretty good player. And Yuri Tillerman, 26-year-old central midfielder, won the FA Cup with Leicester, scored that goal, and has been linked with huge moves for the last 2 years. So, very reputable players. What could go wrong? But this isn't FIFA or Football Manager. Every new signing changes the dynamic of a team and a squad, and changes the tactical output. So, what are the ripple effects of these moves? Are they all positive? Are they all negative? Are they somewhere in between? I want to take a look at that and address Villa's squad. So, what we have here on the board is what Unai Emery essentially settled on as his first choice 11 by the end of the season. It's not actually the team that beat Brighton on the final day to secure a Europa Conference League spot because Alex Moreno was injured, and that's where Luca Dean had to step in. But fitness permitting, this is pretty much what he landed on for the last 10 or 15 games. The central defensive column was pretty set. Mings and Konsa, Douglas Luiz and Camara in midfield was a given if they were fit. Leon Bailey and Ollie Watkins were the only players really that have any speed in this attack, so they had to play when fit, and that kind of led to John McGinn playing in this number 10 role here, and fitness permitting, Matty Cash playing at right back as well. We did see a little bit of Young stepping in for Cash when he was injured because he did miss quite a big chunk of time and came back late from the World Cup. We also saw Boubacar Camara miss some time because of injury, so Leander Dendoncker stepped in for a little while, but to be honest, that wasn't so convincing. So actually, John McGinn dropped in here quite a lot, and we saw Emi Buendia playing off Ollie Watkins as a number 10. But really, this was a squad of about 14 or 15 players. And we know that heading into a 38-game season and 3 cup competitions, they're gonna need more. So you have to address the squad, and in the summer, you get the chance to look at what you've got and where you're weak and where you're strong, and then build on that dynamic. So where Unai Emery landed was basically this. The absolute pillars of this squad are Emi Martinez, one of the world's best goalkeepers, and frankly Villa are very lucky to have him, a World Cup winner. Tyrone Mings, who is the emotional leader and the defensive organiser at the back. Douglas Luiz, who is a set-piece taker and the prime source of creativity deep in midfield, and really the massive source of ball progression they have. John McGinn's the captain. He's great fun, and he's also a very good footballer who's very, very versatile. And of course, the only player at the club who is a recognised top-level goalscorer, Ollie Watkins. Those 4 or 5 players all the way through the spine of this team are quite literally the heartbeat. And so, in a usual squad building scenario, you probably look at that and go, okay, that's great. Where can I build off the back of that? Where am I weak? So the weaknesses look pretty clear to me, and it starts at right wing. Bailey has been inconsistent and he's been injury prone, and Villa lacks speed in attack without him or Watkins. And they really do need to address this position with either key quality or depth. And look, they spent the first part of the summer trying to court Nico Williams from Athletic Club, so apparently they agree. We've also got a weakness potentially at right back. Ashley Young has now been released, he's gone. There's only one senior right back at the club. They're gonna need more than that, and there's a feeling at Villa as well that maybe Cash isn't quite the player that Unai Emery likes at right back, because technically speaking and in tight spaces, there are a couple of different struggles. Beyond that, backup goalkeeper could certainly use some work. Robin Olsen is okay, but he's not great with the ball at his feet, and Villa play a very heavy possession style where they draw teams onto them and play through them. If the goalkeeper can't partake in that, it kind of messes up with the whole system. And then I guess you could possibly argue as well that central midfielder was an issue. Camara has had his injury problems, and playing more than 38 games, possibly up to 50, would mean that genuine competition and cover for Douglas Luiz would be required. So the first face through the door was Yuri Tillerman, who's a really good stylistic match for Douglas Luiz. They offer very similar creative qualities, they offer very similar set-piece delivery, and with Douglas Luiz cannot possibly play 50 games in a season, you do need adequate backup, and that's what Tillerman is. There is, however, a slight concern. But Tillerman has played an awful lot of football for a 26-year-old, and age is often a bit of a misnomer in football. Often it's better to look at how many professional seasons a player has played to really get an idea of how many races that they've run. Now, Tillerman started very, very early. We're talking 16, 17, into the Anderlecht first team, playing senior football every single week, which means he has clocked over 40,000 senior minutes. This is a lot of minutes. It's actually the same track that guys like Pedri and Saka and Bellingham are on, and it's something I'm deeply concerned about because frankly, if you start earlier, you peak earlier, unfortunately you burn out earlier as well. And we've got some examples of that too. Look at Romelu Lukaku peaking early and maybe declining a little bit physically early as well. Wayne Rooney was the same, although I accept there were some other conditions there. And this means that Tillerman at 26 is quite possibly taking on a very big final contract on a free transfer, which means the wages are often inflated, and he's not a true 26-year-old. It might be that actually his best days are behind him. We'll have to see, and maybe playing fewer games is the best thing that could ever really happen to him at this stage of his career, but it's something that Villa should be financially a little bit wary about. And then next through the door is Pau Torres, who will probably have signed for Villa by the time you see this. And Pau Torres is very, very interesting because he is a completely different style to one of the aforementioned pillars of the team, Tyrone Mings at left centre-back. So, onto the board, and we can see Torres here. I've put him at left centre-back because that is the position he has almost exclusively played through his career at Villarreal. Very often, if you're a left-footed centre-back, you don't have to play on the right-hand side because there's such a shortage of left-footed centre-backs that they never really get pushed onto the other side. So Torres is a player who plays here, which is the same as Tyrone Mings. And he's got a very different profile to the other Villa centre-backs, which we can take a look at right here. So I want to draw your attention to the bottom half of the graph to start with, because this is really where Pau Torres shines. And this is going to sound a little bit strange, but you don't buy Pau Torres to improve defensively, even though he's a centre-back. You buy Pau Torres to improve offensively and on the ball. And all of his key strengths and all of his key stats measure up to that. They are in possession stats. He's got lots of long passes attempted and lots of long passes completed. His 91st and 92nd percentile for all of that. Switch passes, anything that goes over 40 yards and vaguely horizontal, he's also top tier for that as well. And look at the progressive passes, 96th percentile. And the progressive carries, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. It really, really doesn't. Don't worry too much about the tackles because centre-backs really shouldn't be actually getting involved in that many tackles. It means they're steaming out of the line or maybe getting involved in situations they possibly shouldn't. However, there is one defensive statistic we will revisit in a moment, which is of concern. But for now, look at the on-the-ball stuff. So here we have Villa set out in the 4-4-2 or 4-4-1-1, whatever you want to call it. And we know that Unai Emery is going to encourage playing out from the back. So the ball starts with Emi Martinez in goal, probably moves into Douglas Luiz in the pivot or into Camara, but Villa have a heavy left-sided bias, so they almost always try to go into Douglas Luiz, and he'll send the ball back to the left centre-back where possible. So this is where Torres kicks in, because with the ball at his feet, Torres is much more enterprising than maybe Tyrone Mings is, and what that means is he can find these passes into Jacob Ramsey here. This is a really important progressive pass that Villa tried to play, and the switch passes that come into play can maybe release Leon Bailey further up, or maybe he can switch the point of emphasis and bring Matty Cash into play on the other side. What's also important is the ball progression. So Torres, again, travelling with the ball. He can take the ball and move with it all the way forward, and that can break lines. The power of a progressive dribbling centre-back cannot be underestimated because it can rip apart man-marking structures. What that can mean is it can create spaces for others, because if Torres runs forward with the ball, someone is eventually going to have to come and close him down. That means that someone unmarks themselves, and Torres can usually find that player. That's really important and massive in terms of build-up and progression, and I believe that's exactly what Unai Emery wants more from his centre-backs, as he's able to play out from the back under pressure in any scenario. But here's the thing. For Torres to do all of this from his natural left centre-back spot, which is important for his left foot and the angles he plays at, and he has done all his life, he is going to have to oust Tyrone Mings from that position. Now, do not underestimate how over-reliant Aston Villa are on Tyrone Mings, either emotionally, from a defensive resilience point of view, an organisation point of view, but most specifically, from an aerial and combative point of view. Tyrone Mings is the only player on this team that is very, very good at defending the box. And we've got a simple stat that can show you exactly how different he is compared to the others. So here's Tyrone Mings' profile, courtesy of FB Ref, and I want to draw your attention to one very specific thing. Percentage of aerials won. 95th percentile, just under 72%, which is vastly higher than what Pau Torres has achieved throughout his career. In fact, it's a noted weakness of Pau Torres that he can't compete in the air against the biggest and burliest of players, whereas Tyrone Mings, you could argue it's his absolute biggest strength. Now, Tyrone Mings in an Aston Villa context is so important, we know this, because every time they play without him, they mostly lose. It happened in the first game of last season where they played against Bournemouth. 2 minutes in, they concede a goal from a corner, Philip Billing rises highest, and in the second half, Kiefer Moore, another 6'4" target man, heads one in to make it 2-0. Mings is immediately reinstated to the team because it becomes clear that aerially they are suspect without him. Now, over the course of last season, Villa played 5 games without Tyrone Mings, and they lost all of them, including one in the FA Cup to a lower league team. And actually, since they were promoted back to the Premier League in 2019, without Mings, they've only managed to win one single game in the entire time, and that was a 1-0 squeaky win against Norwich in the year that Norwich went down. So the significance of him in the starting lineup is very, very clear. And the difference in level in the air between Mings and Pau Torres could barely be more stark. Just take a look at this graphic, which really hammers it home. Tyrone Mings, 95th percentile on aerial wins, 71.8. Ezri Konsa, his usual centre-back partner, 59.8. It's on the low side for a centre-back. And Pau Torres down here in the 23rd percentile, a noted weakness of his. If you were to take Tyrone Mings out of the team and replace him with Pau Torres, it's very possible that Aston Villa would become the weakest team from a central defensive aerial perspective in the Premier League. And while that may not matter in other leagues, this is hugely important in England. I mean, you've got teams like West Ham, coached by David Moyes, and Brentford, who put a particular onus on set pieces. Bournemouth, Luton, they're all going to try and make up the margins on set pieces. Like, it's a rough and tumble league. It really, really is. Even Man City, who are the best team in world football, are running 4 centre-backs, Rodri and Erling Haaland. They are absolutely massive. And any manager who wants to consistently win games in the Premier League cannot afford to ignore this very simple part of the game. So Tyrone Mings should be considered undroppable by Aston Villa for this very reason, as long as they don't go and recruit 3 other guys who are exceptional and make up the difference, which seems unlikely. As a brief aside, I do worry about centre-backs who have this noted aerial weakness coming into the Premier League in a regular basis anyway, because it's very difficult to think of Premier League centre-backs who have genuinely hit the heights and hit the top level who have this weakness. Now, I'll challenge you to think of your favourite Premier League centre-back. And I'll bet it's John Terry, or it's Rio Ferdinand, or Nemanja Vidic, but it might be Virgil van Dijk. Whoever you support, it will probably be correlated to your club. But there's absolutely no way they struggled in the air. We think of great centre-backs and we think of big, burly guys who elbow their way to the ball. They do whatever it takes in order to get their head on it and be as brave as possible. So actually, if you have this weakness, you don't tend to make it to the upper echelon of Premier League centre-backs. And you look at some of the other guys that we've seen over the years who do struggle with this, and they have been prevented from making that step. So where I see Pau Torres, you might see someone like Victor Lindelof, who you just think could be a little bit stronger in the duel and maybe could be a little bit more boisterous when jockeying and jostling for position. And Joe Gomez had that problem too. Callum Chambers never stuck at the top level, and Ezri Konsa actually happens to have that issue too. He's posted some of the worst aerial win percentage rates in the last 5 seasons. So there is some evidence to suggest that a player like this, with this kind of weakness, may not quite take to Premier League football. And of course, every player is different, every player is himself, so it'd be very interesting to see how Pau Torres goes. But historically, he struggled in this area, and historically, centre-backs in the Premier League who struggle in this area have struggled in general. And he's a 30 to 35 million pound player. He's a big price tag to look up to. So let's go back to the board one final time and look at exactly how this might look and what Unai Emery's options are for organising his Aston Villa defence. And we're going to start by assuming that Pau Torres plays left centre-back because that's where his on-the-ball qualities can truly shine, and surely you wouldn't pay 30 to 35 million pounds for a player and then put him out of his comfort zone. Presumably that's not going to happen. So Torres plays left centre-back, and what you probably expect from here is to bring Tyrone Mings in at right centre-back. Now, it's not necessarily the case that he can't do it. It's more that I'm not sure if there's anyone that's ever seen it happen. He's played as a left-back for Bournemouth and got converted into left centre-back, and throughout his Villa career for the last 4 years, he's never once played at right centre-back. This naturally affects the angles you play at, it affects the passes you can play, and he is very left-footed, just like Pau Torres. So this is a concern. Maybe he thrives, maybe he doesn't. It is a bit of a gamble. The next option is back 3. Tyrone Mings in the middle, clearing everything with his head, and Pau Torres in the left channel and Konsa in the right-hand channel, maybe playing the ball into space and carrying the ball. And actually, if you play Torres in this channel, he will get a lot of room to take the ball and dribble with it, which is a real positive. The problem with that is, as far as I can tell, Unai Emery has never actually landed on a back 3 by design and stuck with it. He has often navigated his way there as a bit of a fail-safe, as a bit of a mid-season fix, but he's never actually set out to play a back 3. And when you get to the summer, you get to plan a squad from scratch, you get to make changes, and you get a fresh canvas to paint on. So I do have trouble believing that Unai Emery is setting out this summer to go ahead and play a back 3 with Villa. The final potential solution here is that Mings plays as kind of like an inverted left back where he switches around into centre back. That does happen now. Back 4s become situational back 3s in football. But again, with the Villa template, that doesn't really work because Villa's formation tilts round to the left, Ramsey comes inside, and Moreno flies forward into the space to attack. So that means that the right centre-back or the right back are the one that are pushed in. So Mings isn't going to play as an inverted centre-back. In fact, what might be more likely is that Cash comes out, Ezri Konsa becomes the new Juan Foyt from Villarreal and plays right back, creeping in to right centre-back. Mings ends up here in this general area anyway, and then Torres ends up over here. So again, I'm kind of at a loss to figure out how that would work unless Villa intend to completely switch the way they play. But that wouldn't make sense because Alex Moreno, the left back, is the quickest player in the team, and if he can't join the attack, you're neutering him. So, something big is changing here for Villa. Rather than take the dynamic that was already working extremely well, Unai Emery has decided to change something and shift something quite big. Either Tyrone Mings is dropped, and that could create an aerial concern for Villa when they come up against tall sides, which is basically all of them in the Premier League, and create a real set-piece weakness, or he's moving over to right centre-back, a place where he hasn't really played any football and could find difficult to learn. Now, I appreciate the argument that Villa need depth. Villa have a lot of competitions to play in and a lot of games to play, but this is the sort of signing which really raises questions and raises eyebrows because it plays with a dynamic that was already very well set rather than builds on it and upgrades the weaknesses. So how it goes, I don't know, but I'm fascinated to see.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.